Hello everyone, what's up, and welcome back to the third part of Silk Road and Ross Ulbricht. And yes, that's my bed. No, I don't have the best looking bed, and yes, we're still in my bedroom. But, you know, oh well. Before we start, yes, I am now 24. Which, compared to Ross's, successes when he was 26, I feel very, very unaccomplished. Now, last time we spoke about Nob, I'm pretty sure Nob, who was obviously an undercover agent who went by the name of Carl's agent. That was his agent force, his, attack force and shit. But anyway, so he was posing as a guy named Nob, and he started to get a little greedy. He wanted money. He wanted actual fucking money. Now, we gotta scroll back and talk about this guy that was actually working for Ross. He was, Nob, if I didn't mention this in the last video, I'm gonna mention it now. Nob was actually wanting to sell a lot of kilos of coke. So he actually went to Ross. He's like, hey, I want to sell this, but it's a lot and I don't know how to sell this. So Ross actually went to a guy that can sell basically almost anything. Guy was a master at selling. And so that happened. They sent over the kilos to that dude, right? Now here's the fun part. Now they knew they were going to get a ton shit of drugs from this obvious thing. They were going to send it over to him. However, he wanted to, I don't know, I guess he was feeling like he was being watched or something. He basically grabbed the package, walked down, and threw it in the trash. That's it. He threw it in the trash. Now, the cops thought they had him the moment he picked it up. He's like, oh, he's going to bring it in his house. He's going to do this. No, when they saw him throw it in the trash, they're just like, well, we can't arrest him for throwing it actually in the trash. He doesn't even know what's in it yet. We can actually arrest him when he brings it inside. And that's what he did. When he thought that no one was looking, he went back outside, grabbed the drugs that were thrown in the trash, and went back in his house. So after that happened, police stormed in and actually took control over his computer. Now, after taking control of his computer, they realized he had in his fucking site, his control, were everybody's bitcoins. You know this is important because that is money. That is a lot of fucking money to be translated into little itty bitty bitcoins. So he had within his possession all of that, and he never touched it. However, this is where it gets a little tricky because one agent actually stole money from Ross, from the actual fucking Ross, from Dread Pirate Roberts, who they still did not know who the fuck he was, even with this guy's laptop, because to everybody else, his identity was kept hidden. However, with Ross's identity being a secret, that was actually a good thing for him, considering that I don't remember the exact amount of money they stole. Well, just this one agent, he stole a huge chunk the first time, and when he saw that nothing happened, he stole it again the second time with equaling a little bit of an amount. However, Ross did catch on. He did see that a lot of money was missing from him. And one thing he did not permit whatsoever was theft. He didn't like people fucking stealing his shit. Now, at the time, the two agents, the agent who is known as Carl, aka Nob, was interrogating this guy, basically wanting to know who was Dread the Pirate Roberts, and he didn't know. And then you had the other agent obviously stealing money, and not only that, but he was also in the questioning and the interrogation. However, when Ross caught on about his thievery, he thought it was the guy that worked for him. Obviously, he didn't know that he was fucking captured. There was nothing in the news. But anyway, so what happened was that, no, I'm just playing. I just like building up shit. Anyway, what happened is that Ross, since he caught on to the fact that he was stealing money from him, like I said, he thought it was him. He didn't think he was captured or anything. So he messaged Nob to send over some goons to his house, because obviously he knew the address. He knew how he looked like. So he sent over his address and told him to rough him up. Basically beat him the fuck up. However, No one could have predicted that he would change his mind over roughing him up and evolve into, actually, can you turn that into a hit instead? Now, being the ever so resourceful, we did send him videos of them drowning the person. And then afterwards, he made it seem like a gory scene out of a fucking movie. I don't know. He did make it look like this dude was killed. He had stuff coming out of his fucking, his mouth, which Ross presumed to be blood. He didn't like the sight of what he just, sent out to do. However, he was just like, whatever. He deleted it. I don't know what the fuck happened. Actually, that image is still kept in. You can actually Google that image as we speak. So anyway, that was one account that they can get him for actually putting a hit on someone. So, they made it look like he died. They let him have an out. They're just like, you know what, just get away and everything. This guy was like, I don't know, no one expected him to look the way he looked, basically. They made him out to be like this really hardcore drug dealer and all this and that, but he had 2 little chihuahuas, was married, and was a bit overweight, and looked like a total fucking nerd, and kept crying when they started interrogating him. He didn't seem like the badass dude that Ross made him out to be. However, with that guy out of the way, they kept stepping forward to move in on Ross himself. However, they still didn't know who he was. They still didn't know anything about him. So they kept going in further and further for clues, and I just realized my glasses have been on this whole entire time. However, with more advice from Variety Jones, Ross actually found out he needed to pay for a dirty cop. He needed a cop, basically. And Nob, being the undercover cop, he wanted to cash in on, the fucking money grabbing scheme, because he wanted money for his shit. He saw that Ross had a lot. He wanted some of that himself. So he posed as another dirty cop. He's like, you know what, man, I have this cop paid off. I'm pretty sure he'll do you as well. He's a pretty cool guy, just for small fee. Every information he gives you, you should be set. You should be pretty good. However, during this time, people from the IRS, people from different workforces, task forces were actually came together in order to stop, Ross Ulbricht, or who they thought of as Dread Pirate Roberts. They obviously didn't know his identity, and they were still going forth to get his identity. Now, as a result, because of, not being the undercover, obviously now at this point dirty investigator, he gave Ross a lot of knowledge and a lot of updates about the investigation. However, this made Ross increasingly nervous and paranoid, causing him to want to spend more and more time with friends and family. However, that did not stop him whatsoever for wanting to work on the Silk Road. I mean, I would have jumped ship by now, given it to Variety Jones, and that's it. Call it a done deal and erase all form of contact. However, remember in the beginning of part 1, I said that Ross went on to different sites on Reddit, like different subreddits, and talked about the Silk Road and how you could get on there, and how it was basically an Amazon for drugs, about shrooms, all that good stuff when it was first starting out, right? Okay, now the IRS, one person in the IRS found someone talking about the Silk Road during its very, very starting days. Now, however, it was very interesting considering that Ross, changed his username because it'll keep them off their tracks. And remember, he's thinking like he did back then. We're talking about the Ross from back then. He never knew it was going to potentially get this big, and that one error would cost him a lot. Now, even though they had no idea who this user was, the IRS guy did more digging and found out that the email was under Ross Ulbricht. Yes, he used his actual fucking name for an email account that he was gonna use to, promote a drug website, basically. Now, what I'm about to say is very important because it still causes up a lot of debate on, how it was obtained. However, law enforcement in Iceland, yes, because people all over the world were working on to bring Dread Pirate Roberts down. a task force in Iceland somehow obtained the servers for the Silk Road. Now, you know it's very different to be on a site and extremely different to obtain the server for that site, because now you're into the little nooks and crannies and everything else. However, no one knows specifically how they obtained that server. They just know they obtained it, and it was on a flash drive and shipped out to the ones in, you know, to the ones in New York. They were able to get it, read the server, they copy the server onto a different site, which they never let it sleep because of it possibly being down or whatever the case was. Now, remember how the Silk Road kept being fucking hacked? And since Ross didn't know that much about coding, he couldn't really do much. Now, however, when they obtained these servers, which was stored on a flash drive and is still unknown to how they obtained the fucking server, because they're not releasing that information to this day. Anyway, so they have decided, you know, they're going deep within the servers, and in there was an email for DPR. However, also, there was a username that really stood out, that was also this email was linked directly to the user who was posting, you know, all these stuff about the Silk Road being basically the Amazon of drugs and everything of that, but they didn't connect it. However, those emails quickly went down and were patched up and everything by DPR and his, you know, his people, the one he was paying all this fucking money for. Now, also during that time, since Ross was planning on getting out into a different country, or to different states, guess what? He needed different IDs. Yes, he actually ordered 9 fake IDs to be delivered to his house. But when the police grabbed a hold of it, they went to his house. Well, they thought it was his house. They actually had the wrong street. They were one street over. And they decided, you know what? Time to go home. Time to pack it up. But they decided to go back the next week because they realized they were in the wrong street to begin with. So they went to the right street. They knocked on the door. And guess what? Ross was there. And he himself answered the fucking door. He did not get arrested for this. He did not. He said, you know, hypothetically, if someone wanted to buy these documents, they weren't going to arrest him. The police made it very clear. But if he didn't answer questions, he'd be very suspicious. So he answered questions in a hypothetical way. He said, well, hypothetically, if you want to order, I still think I have my glasses on. If you want to order something illegal, you would go to the Silk Road. Right there, you can buy fake documents, birth certificates, and even drugs if you wanted some. Now, even though he did not get arrested for this, because of the IRS mentioning what username was, you know, hyping up the fucking Silk Road in the beginning, because he kept that to him all to himself for fucking months. Alright? Until recently he's like, well, I think it's Ross Ulbricht. And when they're just like, oh, that's ridiculous. He may live in the same area or within, you know, the same area that, you know, it's so, you know, booming, but it doesn't mean it's him. Alright? However, when he mentioned the username, you know, who was hyping it up, they also connected it to the username to the email that was in the server. So it was kind of like a ding ding for the cops and saying, oh my god, it's Ross. He even lives like near a cafe shop and a public library, both places where they would have public Wi-Fi. However, in October of 2013, he was arrested in a public library because, you know, they went over basically saying, okay, we have our guy. They were looking at him. They were watching him for some time already. And when they finally began to move in, he was headed towards a public library because the cafe had no Wi-Fi. Well, it had no spots to sit because everyone and their fucking mama was there, basically. Everyone wanted to be there for some odd fucking reason. So he basically went to the public library where they stormed in and to make sure that his hands were on the keyboard. But one police officer named Jared played in as, you know, this employee, basically, so he would have to physically log on to the site himself. So they could catch him with his hands in the cookie jar, basically. Now, even when they captured him, Ross had to wait a year in jail for his trial to actually begin. However, when the trial began, yes, during the trial. However, when, you know, the trial began, there were murder charges that were dropped because, you know, no body, no case. And they could charge him for attempted murder or conspiracy to commit murder. However, anything having to do with actual murder, like the bodies and shit, even though Ross supposedly did send out more hits on more people, they had no proof. They did not have a body, so therefore, what can you even fucking begin to charge this guy for? Now, also during trial, the police, you know, the prosecution still did not explain how they obtained the servers in the first place. Everyone knew that they have somehow obtained the servers, but no one knew exactly how. And this is interesting because then it plays into a factor of, did they have to, you know, hack a fucking person just to obtain these servers? Because if they had to hack, it will be done illegally. Now, any specialists that were able to prove of Ross's innocence, because Ross said that, you know, he didn't have the site, he sold the site to someone else, and someone was actually taking care of it. He no longer had possession of it. So this was interesting. They have various defenses, various special defenses, but they weren't allowed to speak on the trial. Now, however, they weren't allowed to speak because all this evidence was brought to them, you know, to their desk. They had stacks on stacks of evidence proving Ross's innocence. However, they couldn't present any of that because it was brought up last minute. So all their efforts to bring specialists, to bring witnesses, were obviously denied by the prosecution and the judge. So they weren't having any of it. So it was basically a recalling on the prosecution's part. There wasn't no fight, considering that the fucking defendants weren't allowed to even bring their side. You know, you would also think that, hey, there is a chance that Ross is innocent. However, like a true crime that I made a video about in the past, Pauline Parker and Juliet Holm, Ross Ulbricht kept a journal of updates on what was happening on the Silk Road. So here's this thing, bottom line, people. Once doing something illegal, do not keep a journal whatsoever. You're incriminating yourself. Now, on February 4th, 2015, he was actually found guilty, convicted, and finally sentenced on March 29th of that same year. He was sentenced to, like, basically prison, life in prison. And since he was charged federally, we all know that in federal prisons you are not allowed parole, even if you're a really badass inmate. No, you can't leave. Basically, you do get certain privileges, and those certain privileges, that if you're an awesome fucking, inmate, you get to stand outside for an hour or two in a cage. That is your, your you time. But for me, it's like, I don't see how that, I don't know. But either way, like I said, he was very, why would you keep a journal, first of all? And also the second part, I still would like to know how the police obtained these servers. Because if they did it illegally, they would have to drop everything, every bit of information that they obtained because of that server. Also, meaning that Ross Ulbricht would be set free on a technicality. Alright, everyone, that's it for me. Thank you all so much for putting up with this third and final part. Like I said, I kind of predicted 3 parts, and I made it into 3 parts, even though second, and this one were kind of long. But anyway, guys, thank you all so much for joining me for another video. And guess what? Check out the podcast that just came out yesterday. I really hope it's been uploaded, because I'm not in charge of uploading this episode like for the podcast. I was charged last episode. But anyway, if you also want to check out the podcast, guys, and if you're into horror movies, please check out next week's podcast on SoundCloud. It's very nice. I've planned to do, a Halloween horror movie trivia game. So if you think you know your horror movies, if you love horror movies whatsoever, please check that out. We're also going to do a bunch of stuff, considering that is a spooky month. So, I don't know. It's pretty nice, pretty solid. Anyway, guys, thank you all so much, and have a great fucking week. Bye-bye.